Hi guys, and today I'm going to receive Yan and Sean, who are two software developers who work together in a company in San Francisco, and after moved to Taiwan where we met, and they decided to create the online coding school to teach web development. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hi.
It's my pleasure. So, can you guys tell us how you got started as a web developer?
Yeah, I'll say my story real quick. I was basically, having graduated college, felt like I had no real world skills and knew that I had to find a way to just be economically viable as an individual, find a way to make a career. And so I started learning programming. And part of that was I met someone who knew how to program, and they helped me out along the way, gave me some pointers. And a lot more of that, though, is just like putting together a lot of different pieces online and figuring out how things work, and spending a lot of time just learning how to learn something that I hadn't learned before.
And for the story, actually, so the guy who pushed you to programming is also one of our common friends. So like he made you start programming, and then after you made me start programming, and yeah, and that was 7 years ago. So yeah, I mean, thanks for that, Yan, because if I hadn't met you, then I wouldn't be a programmer now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for learning, Julian. No one does. Almost no one.
Yeah, because I think you told many people, but actually like very few of them actually followed up. And I keep that because I also made my ex roommate learn programming, and now he has a job as a software developer. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Um,
So,
and uh, and so you started with PHP and WordPress, right?
yeah. The grandfather, the person who taught me before like I helped you get into it. That guy, he said, just learn WordPress and learn a bit of jQuery, and basically you'll be able to get clients.
Those were a good time. There was no
Simpler
React,
times.
yeah, no crazy JavaScript, just like old PHP and yeah, WordPress, and life was good. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know JavaScript at all. It was like there was one language, because HTML and PHP are sort of just intermingled everywhere. So it was super simple in theory. It was just write the same kind of code everywhere, and nothing has to change.
I remember at that time, like you could charge like 5 to 10K for a static website because theme forest wasn't a thing yet. And yeah, just with some HTML and CSS, like if you knew how to make something good looking, then yeah, you could charge insane amounts. Yeah, that was that was another time. Yeah. And then I came in 2015, and there was a JavaScript and React, and that changed everything. And what about you, Sean? How did you start programming?
I started several years ago, mainly kind of getting out of college, and sort of similar story to Ian. Basically, like in college, I was looking to go into medicine, or maybe like do a PhD, and kind of getting to the point where I just didn't think that was a great choice. And I wanted to do something more creative, more like practical kind of building. And I also just didn't think that those careers would like the right match for my personality. So I spent 1 or 2 years after college doing a few other things, and then eventually kind of drifted towards programming, which is where I thought I was going to end up. And I started learning online. I didn't have a lot of savings at the time, so I basically had to try to use like free resources that I could find. So I started learning in like March of 2016, and I just went totally all in. Like I was learning like nonstop all day, every day, just doing every single thing I could, watch YouTube tutorials, like watch other tutorials, like some other resources, find different programming courses. And I ended up using this one resource called Free Code Camp a lot, which has like a full kind of web development curriculum. So I worked my way through that, and then did a few other things. And more or less a year later, I was then working in San Francisco, which is where I met Ian. So that's kind of that's kind of how I got here.
So in San Francisco, that was your first job as a programmer.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and so I guess you were doing a lot of JavaScript.
Yeah, I mean, we were working on this secure cybersecurity startup, and they have like this web platform. So it's a web app, like a lot of applications that we're familiar with, and so that was like JavaScript, React based, and yeah, so we were working on that.
And I think you said two important things when learning about programming. The first one is that you did it very intensively. There are many people who say they want to start learning programming and they check out a few tutorials, they tried a few things, but it doesn't quite work out for them. And then they stop, and then maybe a couple of months after they try again, and they never get anywhere because they don't build any momentum. But I think this is something actually a bit hard to get started. So at the very beginning, you really need to commit to do this intensively, and have probably like if you can have like a few weeks or a few months available, like that's the best. But even if you can't, I think like every day try to find like, I don't know, 30 minutes or 1 hour available in your day to do something, because you need to load things in memory. If you take too much time between your learning, it's not going to work. And the second interesting thing you said is you realized that programming was a good fit for your personality. And I think that's something that is very important, because many students who are in college, they don't really necessarily think about this. They are influenced by society, and they think, okay, I want to do this job because this is prestigious, this makes a lot of money, but they don't always think whether or not this is a good match for their personality, and this is so important. So I think programming, the thing I really like about it is that it rewards people who can spend time alone, or maybe slightly more introverted. And that's amazing, because outside of programming, like when you're introverted, in general, society doesn't really reward this. We always promote people who are more like outgoing, etc. So I think this is really a key aspect for people who want to become programmers. But that doesn't mean you need to be introverted, but you need to have an ability to focus and spend time alone. If you're someone who always want to be interacting with other people, then I think that's going to be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something there, because there are so many different types of personalities that work with programming. It's something I didn't know at the beginning, obviously. And I don't think many people consider is that there's so many different types of personalities that will work well with programming, because programming is many things. It's extremely creative. So if you're an artistic type, it might be for you. It's extremely interesting if you like to know how things work. So if you're just generally curious and you like to figure out how things work, it might be for you. If you're the traditional type, you like math and you like science, and maybe you're what people consider the usual case, obviously that might work too. But it also might work if you tend towards extrovert. Like you said, I think you hit on it, that you do have to, there's going to be some time alone. There's just going to be some time with you and the computer. And if that doesn't appeal to you at all, maybe it's not for you. But if the extroverted type becomes a programmer and they can write the program and they're still extroverted,
yeah.
Most programs involve people somehow. Programs just don't live in a vacuum. If you go work at a giant company, you can probably write a bunch of software that just talks to other software, so you can be the complete introvert. But usually you're writing software that's going to be touched by people. People are going to interact with it. And not only are people going to use the software, but you're going to have to get people to use the software. So at some point, someone has to sell the thing that you're building. And by sell, I just mean, talk to people, convince people that it's interesting. It doesn't actually mean being a salesman. And so that type of person who's both extroverted and likes programming can do well too. All sorts of personality types can do well with this.
Yeah, and I think for people who are more towards, who are more extroverted, what they could do is start learning a bit of programming, and then move more towards position of project manager, product manager, etc. But with their like thin layer of technical skills, it's going to be easier for them to be hired. If they don't know anything about tech, about programming, and they try to work in a tech team, that's going to be super challenging, because in meetings with programmers always use a certain jargon of technical words, and yeah, if you just don't understand that, you're going to be lost. And so one thing that is very interesting for people who want to learn web development is, do you have to be already a technical person if you want to get into the field? Do you have to be good at math, or do you need to have followed like a curriculum of like Do you need to be like a sort of engineer, or you can just be come from any background and make it as a programmer?
I think that the interesting thing to think about is, especially if you're talking in the context of web development, the vast majority of applications that you use, or sort of like processes you have to represent in a program, they make perfect sense to someone in terms of like, do they intuitively understand it? Like, do they intuitively understand what's going on? Like, if you think about, for example, like later you're going to probably upload this video to YouTube. And if you think about the process that has to happen, this is something that like people can understand all the steps involved and they make sense. So the programming aspect of it is just understanding like, how do you learn to translate these steps that you understand into steps that the computer can understand? And that aspect of it is just kind of learning the syntax and rules of a specific programming language. And then also maybe you have to learn a little bit more, like you have to use a framework or something. There's a little bit more to learn, but the core component of it, I think, is not that difficult, because you just have to understand like how to translate these practical steps that you already understand into something a computer can understand. And I think that everyone has the capability to do that. Whether or not it's the right thing for you to do in terms of like making it as a programmer, making it as a programmer probably means like you can really do this as a career for like 1, 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years. And I think that really comes back to this whole like personality piece. Like, does it mesh with your personality? Do you enjoy the process? Do you enjoy doing the work? Do you enjoy it when like things don't work well and you encounter bugs and problems? I think that's really the more important question for the longer term, if this is the right fit for someone. But in terms of just like purely being able to do it, I think that most people, if you have like pretty decent kind of intelligence and like education, you definitely can learn how to program.
Yeah, it is a weird question. Well, not like you asked a weird question, Julian, but I think people think about it that way a lot. Like, do I have the background? Do I have the qualifications?
This is the last time I invite you here.
Yeah, all right, let me quick get the pitch out and I'll leave.
I'm joking.
A lot of people do think about it that way. It's like, do I have the background? And the truth of the matter is programming is not for everyone, but it's really hard to quantify why or when it's not. Because like we were talking about earlier, all kinds of people might get into it. Even a super social person might get into it and build social software that helps them connect with more people. Like, you could think about Facebook. I have no idea what personality type Mark Zuckerberg would fall under, but look at the situation the world is in right now, where so many people who would be out doing a lot of things with their friends are indoors and not going out because of the pandemic situation. Maybe one of those people would think of a way to write software that would actually help them get more social interaction. So software is ultimately just a tool to get things done. And if you're a very social person, those things that you want to get done socially, you might be able to augment that with programming. So it really isn't for anyone. Like, my brother learned programming and then just stopped. He's a good example of someone it wasn't really for, but he learned it first and then decided it wasn't for him. He didn't decide beforehand because he had XYZ qualifications or lacked them. It was after the fact that he tried it. He did learn it. He even used it as his job for a while, and then later decided it just wasn't for him. So it's hard to quantify what makes it not for someone. I don't know the answer to that, but it does seem that it's not for everyone. It's just hard to tell without doing it.
Also, people need to understand that in programming, I see like two main categories. One category, which does require some very heavy technical skill, is if you're building infrastructure. So for example, if you are building a web browser like Google Chrome or Firefox, or operating system like Windows or Linux, yes, like this is super hardcore, and the barrier to entry is absolutely huge. The tools they use, the programming languages are much more difficult, like C, C++, Rust, etc. Super not friendly for beginner. So yes, if you want to get into this, you need to give yourself several years. And during all this time, you probably won't be able to find any job. So yeah, this would be something difficult. But this part of the software development industry is really a small part, because there is a small minority of companies who are building this infrastructure, they are making a ton of money because their work is extremely useful. It's used by many people, but the vast majority of the industry build application on top of this infrastructure. So all the web application they build on top of web browser. For blockchain, for example, most blockchain developers build decentralized application on top of blockchain, but they don't build blockchain themselves. And so if you're in this other part of the industry, the majority where we really build application for users, then you can use all the tools that are created by other developers who are super smart. And you don't need to be as smart as them. You need to be more aware of what end user really need and be able to translate this into code, but you don't need to know in detail how computer work.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to understand why computers only speak in binary, or how can you go from hardware to something like Linux? How can I go from hardware to something someone else can build on? That's very intense stuff, and it's certainly not what most software engineers understand. Yeah. Unfortunately, maybe it'd be great if everyone in the field understood all that. I wish I knew how to build the Linux kernel right now. Just like sit down, give me a weekend, second Linux kernel coming out. But not everyone knows that, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you guys felt this, but personally, when I started learning programming, and I was able to do the first visual things in a browser, maybe by using some jQuery plugin, like some library where I made things move around. I was just so amazed. I was like, wow, that's it? Just like 10 lines of code and I can do it? Wow, that's easy. And
yeah.
And yeah, so like you have this like easy win when you start programming. So I think the curve of progression is a bit weird because at the beginning you progress quickly and then you hit a wall because at the beginning you don't know what you don't know. So you do this you have this quick win, you feel like this is super easy, and then you realize that actually a big part of the job is to architect your application and to write code in a way that is scalable, and not so scalable in terms of having millions of users, but more scalable in terms of being able to add more feature without making it too complicated and without making it impossible to reason about. And so for me, like that was the most difficult thing, and there is no shortcut to this. You do need to spend time building application, trying different tools, etc. But having said that, so trying to get in the shoes of a beginner here, and I want to learn web development. Where do I start?
Yeah, well, where do you start right now, or like where did we start? I guess it's
where do I start right now?
Well, right now, so let me go back real quick, actually, to the way I learned and the way Sean learned as well, was just kind of putting together all sorts of resources, because there are tons and tons of resources to learn programming, web programming in particular, right now online, and there are just so many of them that, at least for me, it was like, which one do I learn? And obviously, I did it. It's very possible. You can go online and you plus Google can teach yourself to code in a matter of, I don't know how long. It depends on your ambition and the time you have available on your hands. So today I would say try out the course that we built, that me and Sean built to teach programming. And the reason we built this thing is because of that sort of lack of direction that exists in the ecosystem. There's tons of things to learn, and it's not necessarily clear where to go to get started. So we built a very linear flow of, try this, here's some HTML, here's some CSS, here's some TypeScript, just go through this, and you essentially can just go step by step, and you'll be making progress that we've chosen out as like, here's the next thing, and just go through it. You can certainly go out on the internet and build that yourself, like build your own roadmap. It just takes more time, and it can often be discouraging because if you don't get wins quickly, which you have to provide for yourself, then you might just stop. I've seen programmers just stop before at that stage. I stopped myself. I tried to learn programming around the age of 16, and I just stopped because I didn't get any early wins. It wasn't until much later that I actually took it up again.
Hmm. Yeah, so I think these early wins are something very, very important. Um, it, I think what your online coding school is doing great is it removes the need to set up your development environment, and that's really a big blocker for people. If you want to develop a website with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, for us, we are senior programmer. This is super easy, but for other people, beginner, that can be really overwhelming, especially if you're on Windows. Sometimes some tools are not compatible on Windows. So what's great with what you built is that you can just go online in your browser. Doesn't matter which operating system you're running. You just log in and you use the user interface and you can start to code, but in your browser without having to install anything. And I think that will like help you to get the ball rolling and like, yeah, give you this motivation to go through obstacles that will come after that.
I mean, part of the design is like that intentionally to try to get people to this moment that you mentioned, Julian, where you're like, wow, like I made something move around on the screen, or like, wow, I typed something and like something like there's a result that I can actually see. It's trying to get someone to that stage as quickly and as easily as possible. Because once you start to have that positive feedback loop where you can see like, oh, wow, like I actually did something and I can see a result, it drives you and it motivates you to want to like learn more and to want to like maybe tweak that and see if like, what if you change this line, what happens to it? And so we want to try to get people to that stage as quickly and as easily as possible, and then give them an environment where they can start to go through that iteration cycle like many times. And so that's kind of like that plays into like how we designed the curriculum and the platform.
Yeah, and you mentioned something important, which is to have quick feedback, because this is really how we learn. Like if you see the most simple thing in a role, like how baby learn to speak, they hear their parent speak, and then they try to say the same thing, and their parents correct them, and they have this very fast feedback cycle. And so that's how we learn by having this feedback. And so you give this feedback a lot in your platform, and so that's really great for learning. Let's say I go to your website, pairwise.tech. I tried a few things. I go through your curriculum, and I think at the end you also have a section on React.
Section on React
module, yes.
Oh, okay, so
it's called UI programming, right? So if someone goes there, they'll see UI programming as the title of the module.
And after that, what would be the next step between when they finish all your curriculum and when they get their first software job?
It's part of the curriculum is talking about getting software jobs in particular.
Just to explain more clearly, like what exactly their curriculum is, like going back to when you asked, like, where does someone start? We took a very kind of opinionated view of where someone should start. So just to throw it out there, like to be very specific, we're building a curriculum which will teach people like full stack web development with HTML, CSS, TypeScript, and then React and Node.js. So it's like a full stack JavaScript kind of tech stack, and then specifically teaching TypeScript. And so we can talk more about why we chose those things. But our curriculum is supposed to teach all of those fundamental skills, and then like get you all the way up to the point where you have enough skills that you could be hired onto some engineering team and be productive. And I think we're very confident about that. But we leave you at the point where you would still have to like get that job yourself. And so we'll definitely have support and have like a lot of guidance and like resources around that step. But the curriculum itself is meant to be like, this is the skills, like this is how you actually learn what will be valuable in the job scenario.
I think this is really good that you guys teach TypeScript, because this is really becoming the standard, especially for front-end web development. So TypeScript is a thin layer on top of JavaScript, but you do have to know it. So yeah, and that really sets you apart from many other coding school that teach web development that just focus on JavaScript. So what you guys should do now, if you want to learn web development, is you go to the website to Ian and Sean, pairwise.tech, you create a free account and you start learning. I put the link in the description. Is there anything else that you guys want to add?
Yeah, just to reiterate, we started building this course fairly recently, so it's new, which means it's a trade-off like everything in engineering. One, it's extremely up to date. Everything we're talking about in here is absolutely modern because we just built this course. But two, because we just built it, there's a lot that's not there yet. What is there right now is the basics of programming. And the other thing I want to reiterate is that right now, this is totally free. We do want to build a course that we will sell later on, which is all about how to become a full stack software engineer. But right now, the content up there is all about just programming, the very fundamentals of programming, going from being completely non-technical to being competent programming in this case, TypeScript. But since it's the fundamentals, it's the basics, these same concepts apply across the board. You can, if you learn Python, you're going to be learning all sorts of the same concepts. If you learn, Java or C++, I don't know, C++ is a beast. But if you learn like Ruby or PHP or other languages that you might call scripting languages, it's all very fundamental. And so, yeah, we hope anyone who is interested in programming just tries it out. If it's not for you, you'll know. And afterwards, you won't have to try it again. But it might be for you, even if you think it's not right now.
Yeah. And so go register now because this is still free. And to conclude this, I would like to mention something that Yan, you told me 7 years ago when we first met in Taiwan, and you convinced me to start learning programming. And you told me that with programming, you can build something that is bigger than yourself. And that has resonated a lot with me, and I still remember that. And yeah, this is something that has been very inspiring for me. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for remembering. I'm glad you remembered. Sounds like a good time.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming, and wish you good luck with your coding school, pairwise.tech.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks for having us.
Bye.